You're listening to Tune Dig, a podcast for music lovers. The premise is simple. We dig into an album to discover what makes it interesting, and then we dig into the crates for a vinyl copy to give away to one lucky winner.
Go to tunedig.com for your chance to win, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter for more info about the album that didn't make the episode.
Today we're talking about Run the Jewels 3.
Jewels.
Michael Render is one of my top 5 all-time dead or alive MCs. I love this record.
Surprise released early by tweet on Christmas 2016, the last time we felt joy. And it was recorded in the time leading up to that, obviously, so through September 2016. So I think one interesting lens through which to view Run the Jewels 3 is this is the Trump era record for them, and yet it was definitely written before the Trump era started.
It's a lot like Get Out in that way.
It is a lot like Get Out in a lot of ways.
And we had not even planned to address that in any way.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
And they'd been touring relentlessly. They had been touring like two much younger guys because this kind of success for them had been such a long time coming. And it's been really awesome to watch them not sacrifice 1 inch of who they are and what they believe or what they don't believe, and to have this level of pop culture infiltration, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, I think this is maybe a good moment to just say the crossover between people who listen to music podcasts and people who are aware of Run the Jewels are probably the same people.
Concentric circles.
So no reason for us to spend a whole episode just convincing people to listen to Run the Jewels or to do a light autobiography. Wait, no, autobiographies are about me. No reason to do a light biographical podcast episode on Killer Mike and LP.
If you are alive with a pulse in the 2010s and you don't like Run the Jewels, you're a stupid idiot. And why are you listening to this podcast?
Get on the internet, bro.
Jesus Christ.
But I think a couple of things we can do today are, one, how we can talk about 3 in relation to the other 2 and how we got here and why this record is fundamentally different than the 2 that came before it. And then secondly, I want to give people some other connective points for these 2 artists. I got some early exposure to LP through I'll Sleep When You're Dead because the first track on that record was Tasmanian Pain Coaster, which has Omar and Cedric from the Mars Volta on it. And that record has a ton of collaboration with other crazy folks. There's Trent Reznor is on that record. It caught my attention while I was in college for that brief stint. Remember? And it was just great to be able to have experienced Run the Jewels coming together in a way that was exciting. Like when I heard that this was happening, I could imagine how the 2 of these might work together. They seem like really great people, and it's a true honor to watch them be cultural icons.
Because there's so much joy in every performance. They're having so much fun with it, right? Like, they're revolutionaries, but they're also like dudes that would have a cheap beer and a cigarette in the back of the strip club. You know, like they contain multitudes in a really beautiful way. And I can relate to that. They're just very human.
And I think, I don't want to over dramatize it, okay? But there's also, I think, something really beautiful to Killer Mike coming out of Atlanta, out of Southern hip hop.
In the Dungeon family, first generation. Like how many rappers can say my first recorded verse ever was on Stankonia?
There's something beautiful to seeing someone come out of the Dungeon family in Atlanta and then seeing someone come out of Brooklyn, and the 2 pieces of East Coast hip hop that were not infused together in the 90s. Because the New York scene was so dramatically different than Southern hip hop.
Every person 10 years younger than us is like, yeah, of course, dumb idiot. And it's like, well, they hated each other in 95. It was a whole thing. Like, it almost got violent at the Source Awards. This is a thing to be celebrated. There's identity politics at stake with it, especially dudes of this ilk that are students of classic hip hop in the way that these 2 dudes are.
Yeah, so it's just a beautiful thing to have a couple of folks who earnestly represent the cities that they come from and the scenes that they come from to not only have a musical connection like this, but to truly have what looks to be a real friendship.
Especially because in addition to just being dope, there's a real message. Like, there's a point to the whole thing. You know, it's not a victory lap. I read in a couple of the reviews that it was basically everything about what they're trying to do is iron and sharpening iron. Like, they realized that they were making each other better. They'd finally found their perfect counterpoint in one another. And they're like, we have to push harder. We have to make up for lost time. We have to get better and better and just kill.
They talked about Run the Jewels 3 in comparison to the ones that came before it. For us, Run the Jewels 1, the hands on the album, were about taking what's yours, your world, your life, your attitude. In Run the Jewels 2, the hands on the album were wrapped in bandages signifying injury and healing, which for us represented the growth and ideas and the tone of that album. For Run the Jewels 3, the bandages are off, the chain is gone, and the hands have been transformed into gold. For us, this represents the idea that there is nothing to take that exists outside of yourself. You are the jewel.
And that sums that up really nicely. This is arguably the first real Run the Jewels record. The first two are Killer Mike NLP record. It's definitely their best bars. The brag rap is like, it's super great. Everything is super quotable on this record. But when they get deep in a really beautiful way. Not just about politics, not just about externalities, but there's also a lot of vulnerability. It's very introspective. That's a beautiful part of the friendship that you touch on, is they allow one another to be vulnerable. That happens again and again and again over the course of these songs, and that's really heartening when you think about it in terms of the dynamic between these two dudes.
There's a review in The Atlantic from Run the Jewels 3, and one of the first things it says is, their work is best understood as an omnidirectional middle finger. And I kind of know what this guy is trying to say, but I think it's worth saying that that is 100% objectively wrong. And that is a really, really bad take. Unfortunately, I think that's the perspective of the privileged. It's going to feel like you got your middle finger out at everybody because a lot of times they're talking directly to the position of privilege. Mike and Elle, for all that we've heard from them, are not anarchists. They wrote a manifesto on Run the Jewels 3. This is their first really concise and pointed message. And yeah, even with all the brag rap that goes along with, that's a part of the package that they're trying to make. And we can even pull that directly from, I love to bring up the end of the album first. Report to the shareholders is amazing. One of the lines in here, I think we should take verbatim.
Like I'm made for this, but I'm afraid some days I might be wrong. Maybe that's why me and Mike get along. Hey, not from the same part of town, but we both hear the same sound coming. Woo! And it sounds like war. Woo! And it breaks our hearts. When I started this band, didn't have no plans, didn't see no.
Like, this isn't a joke. It's important to be able to get into this thing and hear brag rap and hip hop from a couple of guys who are joking around a lot of the time, and also understand that's just their posture while they're talking about something deathly serious.
I arrived at sort of the same thought thinking about the first song. It was a really powerful statement to me that the first line of this record is, I hope. That's the first word you hear. I hope with the highest of hopes. I hope is an interesting choice of words for two dudes that have been making music for like basically 15, 20 years at this point. It acknowledges that this moment for them has been a long time coming. They know what a special thing they're sitting on, arguably their manifesto, and they're thankful to be here. They're thankful that people are listening and are sharing in the spirit of what they're trying to do. And I love it. And I love that it has Joy, a legendary Atlanta R&B singer. That song's very heavy. It's like a benediction before the speech begins.
I could have died young. A couple times I took my eyes off the prize, I know a couple people playing my demise, but even birds with broken wings won't fly.
Mike has a barbershop on Edgewood Avenue, and it is literal walking distance from Ebenezer Baptist Church where Dr. King preached. It's just a few steps further from the place where Dr. King was born. So it says a lot about what this record is trying to do, that it starts with a little bit of a benediction and kind of a grounding before it then launches into 3 or 4 songs of like basically a pure show of strength. If it had started with Talk to Me, which was the first song that anyone heard from this record because it came out as an Adult Swim single, it probably would have changed the tone and tenor.
We returned from the depths of the Batman with a gun and a knife and a waistband. With the war with the devil and Shaitan. He wore a bad toupee and a spray tan. So high now, hoping that I land. On a Thai stick moving through Thailand. On the radio, heard a plane hijack. Government did that like they cook crack. I'm moving the world of conspiracies.
And lest anyone not know, you mentioned Adult Swim. They played a pretty integral part in making this connection between the two people.
I'll say.
So thanks to Adult Swim for your cultural contributions to our modern reality, not limited to but including Run the Jewels and Xavier, Renegade Angel. So Talk to Me was the first thing that anyone heard off of this album, right? But then the thing that seemed to cement it culturally was Legend Has It.
Hear what I say. We are the business today. Fuck shit is finished today. RT&J, we the new PB&J. We dropped the classic today. We did a tablet of acid today. Lit joints with the matches and ashes away. We dash away. Donna and Dixon, the pistol is blasting away.
Doctors of death, killing our patients of breath. We are the pain you can
It was
trust.
used in the first trailer for Black Panther, which was aired during the NBA Finals, right? Does this say it was viewed 89 million times in 24 hours?
That is correct. And it was tweeted about more than the game itself. But let's not gloss over the fact that these two pretty extreme, against the consciousness of the sound of rap in general, dudes are the thing that's in the zeitgeist, right? Like Black Panther was a culture shifting moment. So that pairing of those two things, I think, shows how far these two dudes have come after years and years of toiling in near obscurity and working their way up out of cult status. Again, a lot of that had to do with Adult Swim and that boost and being seen through the popular culture lens because they are challenging. Let's talk about the fact that this is a group that a joke from their e-commerce store turned into a whole record in their catalog. Like Meow the Jewels started as a joke commentary on the like VIP bonus package phenomenon on other artist sites where they were like, for $20,000 or $40,000 or whatever, we'll make a record entirely of cat sounds. And then it turned into this thing because of internet culture.
Someone started a Kickstarter or something like that to raise money.
It raised like $40,000. And they were like, wow, okay, we didn't mean this seriously at all. So I don't know what's going on here, but we'll do it. But the proceeds are going to go to the victims of families of police brutality. So let this be a lesson to all of you. Thank you. This turned into a good thing. Don't ever do this to us again.
One time for the pill and the reefer man. One time for the pill and the reefer man.
One time for the peel and the reefer man.
The feel of this record wouldn't be as impactful, I think, without LP's production style. Any entry point is good to hear LP and his thinking separate from Killer Mike, just so you can kind of see the pieces come apart. So we've talked about some earlier LP work, but then also Cancer for Cure, which came out around the same time that LP was producing Killer Mike's last solo record.
So you should pump this shit like they do in the future. So you should pump this shit like they do in the future. So you should pump this shit, pump this shit, pump this
Got a
shit.
sprain on container, could turn parade zombie. Walk with an army on me. Stalked by the harm and armor posse. Polly got me on a radar with a dotties. Watching, plotting, minions out of lower God's scheme. Shit hawks the bound in a town of bullet dodging. I'm a Rocky. Run 100 miles before my car.
I think it also merits saying that it's very analog. Like if you follow him on social, you see what a gearhead he is. He's always playing with old stuff, broken stuff, vintage stuff to excavate weird sounds.
One great example of that on this record is called Ticketron.
Yeah.
Run the jewels live in the garden. Licking off shots and we aim for the darkness. Make it get hot for retarded. Kids could
Looks looks up on YouTube 1983 Ticketron commercial, downloads in 128 kilobytes per second. There's a reason that this group puts out its instrumentals for every record.
Absolutely. So the production is great. It's really fun to listen to. It's always got a lot of energy anyway. It amps me up, whatever. And it does that.
Jog jams for social justice.
Giving this an active listen, or at least some of the tracks, and really paying attention to the detail in the production, not only will unveil some things you probably didn't pay attention to before, but I think it'll give you a good perspective for why, like, when the beat comes in 30 seconds into Talk to Me, why it feels so literally heavy.
So high now, hoping that I land on a Thai stick moving through Thailand. On the radio, heard a plane hijack. Government did that like they cook crack. I move in the world of conspiracies. Obey no rules, I'm doing me. Smoke kush transport to the airport.
We talked about the fact that these are their best bars, but truly, where else are you going to find an artist that says it's almost like a throwaway for them. L comes in on a verse with,
Great man didn't die face down in the Vietnam muscle, walking on style on you. And then I walk uphill both ways to the booth and back to not wild on you. You think baby Jesus killed Hitler just so I'd whisper?
if this is a manifesto, Talk to Me is kind of the mission statement or the acknowledgments at the front. Here's why this book is important. Here's an overview of what you're going to learn today and why we're the best authors in the history of writing books.
It's true. It is sort of like if you had a really great book in front of you, but the author spent the introduction part of the chapter being like, I am the best to have ever written a book on this subject. If you are to find another book like this subject written by someone else, put it down. Pick up this book.
I think the thing that is true both of the production and of the lyrics, they realize the danger inherently of being quote-unquote conscious rappers, because that gets real feckless real quick. And the beats are really hard, but it's not like trap beats. It's not the same old. There's a clear negative space in everything that this record is not. And it seems to me like everything we're trying to say about it is in contrast to the other things in the landscape.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because it would also feel like, yeah, we've spent a lot of time describing how it doesn't feel on the nose for being angry rap. Right. And that's a great way of describing the nuance of how they work together and make an impact. Like, speaking of Thieves, there's a line in there in that same song where they have the sample from the MLK speech. They just say, fear's been law for so long that rage feels like therapy. And I think you've connected the dots between Run the Jewels and Rage Against the Machine before. And I think there's some sort of spiritual ancestry there, because that line kind of encapsulates the way that they're approaching this and why I felt it was important at the beginning to say, like, I don't think they're anarchists. There's no reason to take from what they're saying that they hate everything or think everything is stupid. They think things are really important, actually. But being able to put this kind of unadulterated rage on top of music that you're proud of feels unique. Mm-hmm. Not for better or for worse, but just different. It is a different approach than a Kendrick Lamar record. It's not quite as intended to jar you. They kind of bring you into the living room and have you sit down, and then you're going to get the lecture.
It's a little bit like Training Day when he's like, smoke this, and he's on PCP, and then it's like, all right, well, now you're in the thing. Like, now you can't go anywhere. Because, again, they know, it's like, if I don't yell, you don't listen. If I just go in this lane, with all due respect to the commons of the world, where it's like an abstract poetry slam night thing and it's going to have no impact. Like, all of this is designed, it's triangulated for maximum impact. So it's got to get a little strip clubby. It's got to contain all the multitudes that human beings do. I'm sure not overthinking that. They're just bringing their whole selves to the table, because they've tried lots of different things over the years and nothing has had the same impact as this. So it's like, well, I've done all this other stuff and it hasn't worked, so why not try this?
And I think we can see them just continuing to go. Now that they've seen that it works, not overthinking it now either. Not trying to one-up themselves. I mean, for God's sake, they just played the Super Bowl concert with the Foo Fighters.
For $250 a piece tickets.
We did not go.
It's the only Run the Jewel show in Atlanta that I've ever not been to. We were at the very first one at the Masquerade, and they came out then as they do now to We Are the Champions, which is the perfect statement of who they are, beginning with the song about the end of the game. They've already won.
Anytime you spend looking into the history of the interviews from either of these guys pays off, but especially Killer Mike, who's, I think, continued to run with what's come out of Run the Jewels and allowed himself to become that cultural icon in Atlanta that Atlanta gave him permission to be. Like, he got a platform, people listen to what he has to say, and it's a great example of allowing a culture, a city, to be informed by or inspired by somebody and not necessarily have to agree with 100% of what he's saying. He clearly doesn't fit the mold of a traditional, angry, hip-hop, leftist, Southern Atlantan, on top of some of the more lewd things that he promotes on his Instagram and stuff. Like, I mean, he's also like a very loud advocate of the Second Amendment, at least as he sees it. He's been a Bernie supporter before and appears to be doing it again. Again, not to say whether that does or doesn't fit, but he's a real human being who refuses, at least it seems, he refuses to dilute himself in the name of becoming more palatable to more and more of Atlanta. And I think that choice to represent his true viewpoints and not soften them is the thing that makes him a leader for our city and somebody that we can look up to. He pushes forward. He encourages the Black community to take what is theirs rightfully, how to support one another, how to build a community, and never does so at the expense of white people, of men, of cisgendered people, any number of things, right? I just think that makes such a compelling role model and cultural icon that we can look up to.
When even the first Black president has hugely neoliberal tendencies and bad things are still happening regardless of who's in the big chair, right? It's nice to see our artists continue to be consistent and to say, nope, I want the thing that is going to do the most good for the poor, for the left out, for the people who have not been spoken for. I'm going to speak for those people, right, wrong, or indifferent. And yeah, the execution can get a little wonky sometimes, but it's always there. I think the best execution of that mission statement, but it goes back to what you said, what you read from their artist statement kind of at the beginning of the episode. You are the jewel. We began with this benediction, with this statement of hope, and we end with a reassertion of there is no one but us to do this work. Everyone has abandoned us. Everyone has forsaken us. If nobody else is going to do this work, well, damn it, I guess we're going to have to be the people to do it. We'd rather be getting stoned and going to the strip club and having a good time and living a good life. But I guess if everybody else is going to do the same thing, then we'll be the same people to do it.
Yeah, the example of that struck me was in Don't Get Captured. There's this kind of throwaway line that at least you're literally from the part of Atlanta that you and I are from, you really wouldn't latch onto.
I ain't color my brothers. In Cabbage Town, they put they white ass out. Truth been told, I'm out. Me in here.
If you're not from here, you got no idea what he's talking about. Now, I literally live on the corner of Cabbage Town and another neighborhood, right? You live one neighborhood further away from that, which in Atlanta is just like 5 blocks. Yep. Our neighborhoods are super tiny. But Killer Mike went on to talk about in an interview with Complex, he explained that line. But it's really great to hear him bring this out because it underscores the idea that he's doing the work that you're talking about. He's building communities and coalitions together. He's not just calling people out. Because he talked about, in 95, they started closing housing projects and pushed people out of the city because we had the Olympics in 96, which was like a really weird deal still. But he talked about, in 96, then the Olympics came. They pushed people out of the city who couldn't afford to live there anymore. Then they cut off bus service.
They gave them one-way Greyhound tickets,
Literally,
man.
yeah.
Crazy. It's still unfathomable.
Atlanta has not done the right thing in all capital letters very often in its history. But he's talking about, they push people out and they push them to the south side of Atlanta and then cut off the connection back into the city. And he goes on to say people tend to think of gentrification in terms of race because it's presented that way. And I think it's presented that way because in poor cities, that's what's really going on. Besides that, I think that it's presented that way as a way for people who are really pushing it to make it just look like a black problem so people don't care. He goes on to talk about that this is more than color. This is about class. And to me, that was the line in the concept that underscores this theme that you're talking about, where he is really building a thing and they are building a thing together that they feel needs to be built. And it's not a matter of color. If you find yourself thinking that Run the Jewels is about race, step one, LP is in this group. Step two, you have a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of what they're trying to talk to you about. And Michael Render, the man, goes to great lengths to explain to people that this is not about color. This is about building an understanding of what forces are for and against you in this world and how to take back what's yours. This is about a movement that they're trying to create, and part of the reason why, again, at the beginning, I pointed out the omnidirectional middle finger thing is not an apt description. This is not an angry punk band. These are people who probably care about you as an individual. You, the listener, if you were to meet these people, you would more than likely get a kind reception, and they would really care about you and where you come from and what forces are for or against you. And you've had the privilege of meeting Killer Mike, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I bet he was pretty nice.
It was really interesting. It was in an event put on by Atlanta Influences Everything, and he was in conversation with Dr. Joyce, who teaches the hip-hop history class at Georgia Tech. In the Q&A, I was the white dude in the front row, just so excited to meet one of my heroes. And I asked, because you and I are both natives, and this place matters a lot to me, and we talk a lot about that. I asked him, how do we ensure, with the way that Atlanta is changing, that the next Michael Render comes from Atlanta Public Schools? And he just looked at me and was like, bro, it's so obvious. He didn't say that, but he just looked at me with that face and he said, just get to know your neighbors. He knew by looking at me, like, you live in town, you are a gentrifier, you bought a house in a neighborhood that was not traditionally for people who look like you. Get to know your neighbors. Be part of the fabric of your neighborhood. Don't be one of those people that post something on Nextdoor, like suspicious looking person. And we had a little bit of a challenging back and forth. And then I went up to him afterward for a picture, and he was like, great question. And it shows his very real belief in the power of just dialogue. Like, let's get in a room and challenge each other. We may not see things exactly the same way. The conversation got a little prickly in there a few times, but one of the best things about both of those dudes is they know their perspectives, they know what they stand for, and they have enough experience and enough institutional knowledge to navigate any of those conversations. They're not relying on talking points. They have real, rich worldviews, and that comes to bear over and over again on this record. These are dudes that are not afraid to go toe-to-toe in a conversation because they know that's the only way for things to get better. We got to stop talking at each other and move through some of the stuff. This is not just the March on Washington to march. This is the 10 demands of the March on Washington. We want concrete things to happen as a result of us having made this art.
Go to tunedig.com to sign up for our emails and click the link in the email when you want to win. That's it. Kill your master.